As always, and welcome to Hannity. Multiple breaking news stories to bring you tonight. First, there is a showdown brewing at this hour in the sanctuary state of California, with some now revolting against that state's insane policies that literally shield criminal illegal immigrants. Now, one California county has a new plan to buck the Golden State's policies and actually help ICE enforce America's immigration laws. Now, the undersheriff from Orange County, who is fighting back, he will join us exclusively tonight. Plus, we will show you the all-out hysteria coming from the left after the Commerce Department announced that the 2020 census will actually ask respondents if they're citizens. A citizen question on the census. The horror. The American left is in a complete meltdown tonight. And after all but guaranteeing a wall on the southern border, the president is now closer tonight than you think to fulfilling that important campaign promise. We have those details. And also, President Trump is now getting tough on Russia. The mainstream media is spinning in circles. Didn't they claim he'd never get tough on Russia? Plus, we have brand new discoveries tonight to bring you that could reveal even more bias and corruptions, believe it or not, at the highest levels of the FBI. Sit tight. We had a lot of information that we're going to get in tonight. Jeff Zucker, I hope you're watching tonight's breaking news opening monologue. All right, this January, radical left-wing California Governor Jerry Moonbeam Brown, he signed a bill into law making California a sanctuary state. In other words, California's lawless lawmakers are now literally barring police from determining the citizenship status of anyone charged with a crime, thereby preventing the federal government from effectively deporting criminal illegal immigrants and enforcing federal law. But now some localities, they are starting to fight back. Now, the city of Los Alamitos, that's in Orange County, California, they voted earlier this month to actively defy the state's sanctuary status. And earlier today, Orange County supervisors, they followed suit, and they have voted to join President Trump's lawsuit against California. And in the meantime, while the county sheriff's office has now implemented a new plan to skirt California's insane sanctuary laws, they are going to actually assist the federal government in deporting illegal immigrants convicted of serious crimes and, of course, those standing in the way of the rule of law. Now, the plan is really simple. The Orange County Sheriff's Office will now make the names and release dates for every prisoner publicly available in an online database called Who's in Jail. Now, this will allow ICE to cross-reference identities and deport those illegal immigrants that are convicted of crimes and, of course, a threat to society. And in response, the Attorney General of California, well, he's now issuing a veiled threat to those that challenge California's sanctuary status, which, of course, defies federal law. Watch this.
I'll have to take a closer look at what Orange County is saying and possibly doing. State law is state law, and it's my job to enforce state law. I will do so, and we want to make sure that every jurisdiction, including Orange County, understand what state law requires of the people and the subdivisions of the state of California.
I actually dare the Attorney General of California to do this. Now, if he does, that means the Oakland mayor can be arrested by the federal government for aiding and abetting criminal illegal aliens by tipping them off that they're going to enforce the law. Now, we'll have a lot more on this later in the show when the Orange County undersheriff will join us. Also tonight, the California lunacy continues. That state is now set to sue the Trump administration yet again, this time over a question on the upcoming 2020 U.S. Census. Now, the census will ask non-respondents or those that want to respond, are you a U.S. citizen? That's it. Now, the California Attorney General tweeted that the question is, quote, not just a bad idea, but also illegal. Mr. Attorney General, I beg to differ. Now, there was even more hysteria, of course, in the left-wing, abusively biased, so-called mainstream media. Watch this.
What do we want from the census? We want an accurate count. Let's defer to the experts. Will this help with accuracy? It will not, because people will not answer the question.
Let's be realistic about this. Do we think this is about getting an accurate view of the census and protecting voting rights, or is it to, in fact, suppress minority voting.
So the Justice Department's motivation here seems to be quite so a ruse for adding a question that could very seriously depress participation and result in a failed census altogether.
What do you say to critics who argue that ultimately this is a way to target immigrants, that it's going to be fewer resources for immigrant communities?
Now, the main goal of the census has always been to determine demographic information about the population that lives inside the United States. But the left, members of the biased press, they want you to believe that we aren't allowed to determine how many citizens versus non-citizens are actually living here. That makes no sense, considering congressional districts are literally made up of what the population is. Nothing says that responsible immigration policy, like, well, who's living in your country? Really hard question. We'll have more on that in a second. Now, when it does come to the wall on the southern border, there is some big news out of Washington. According to reports, the president will use military and national defense funding to cover initial construction costs of the wall, citing what is a clear national security risk presented by unprotected borders. This is a huge step forward for the administration, and it would be a political victory and serious progress, of course, to battle and secure our borders. Now, here's what the deputy White House press secretary, Hogan Gidley, had to say about this on Fox and Friends earlier today.
The president is now saying, or he kind of hinted around at least on Twitter over the weekend, that he could use all of that military funding. There was a lot of military funding going into the pocketbooks of those men and women that are fighting for our country. But there's a lot of extra money to be used, more than what they asked for, more than what the White House asked for. So there's talk that he might use that extra money to build the wall. Since he didn't get the funding, he only got 1.6.
That was his Twitter.
You're right. His Twitter was saying we might use the military money to fund the wall. Is that going to happen?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of his announcement, but I can say this is one reason that the
Wait, what announcement?
Well, if he's going to make an announcement how he spends that money to build the wall. But I can say that's one of the major victories for the American people in this piece of legislation that the president pushed, which was actually building a wall.
So when the funding becomes reality, President Trump will be fulfilling a major campaign promise. And don't forget, the president has already started to look for prototypes for this wall. All right, another top story tonight. The Destroy Trump press, they are spinning in circles after more than a year obsessing over Russia collusion. Well, the media's fragile narrative, of course, is crumbling right before their eyes. Now, the left said that President Trump would never, ever be tough on Russia. You might remember this daily hysteria. Take a look.
I think he's afraid of the president of Russia.
Why?
Well, I think one can speculate as to why. That the Russians may have something on him personally that they could always roll out and make his life more difficult.
It's so clear at this point that Vladimir Putin and his associates, somebody has something on Donald Trump.
That may be something that turns the key in the Russia probe, is figuring out why this president is so deferential to Putin and to Russia, and if there is some sort of compromise that they have on him.
Donald Trump is afraid. A political hurricane is out there at sea for him. We'll call it Hurricane Vladimir, if you will, the whole Russian thing.
They make these decisions time and time again in a way that makes it appear that they're hostages, that he's Vladimir Putin's hostage.
That was just last week. Oh, they have something on Trump. He can't act against Putin. Well, yesterday, the Trump administration, they announced tough new actions against Vladimir Putin and his regime in response to the poisoning of a former spy and his daughter in Great Britain. Oh, the Trump policy includes the expulsion of 60 Russian diplomats, the closure of Russia's consulate in Seattle. Pretty tough, make no mistake. This is a very aggressive move against Putin's regime. It sends a powerful message that the United States and our allies are not going to bow down to Moscow. And I guess they don't have anything on Trump. Even former CIA director turned CNN shill Michael Hayden, he's praising President Trump. Wow, hell is frozen over. Let's look.
So, felt familiar, felt a bit like old times. Now look at what just happened. We are tough on Russia. We acted in concert with our allies globally. The United States took a leadership role, very un-Trumpian. And so I'm very happy to see it.
Glad we can make you happy. General Hayden is right, but some in the media, they're still doing whatever they can to discredit President Trump's latest move. By the way, Obama never did anything this tough. He was telling Dmitry Medvedev, tell Vladimir I'll have more flexibility after the election. Watch this.
It was almost like the old days, where the United States and its allies forged something of a common position. The not-so-good part of this, Joe, this is foreign policy on autopilot.
We still could have done a lot more. If we really want to hurt the Russians, and Putin specifically, you go after the banks here, where there's still a lot of Russian money being housed.
I think what's happened is the allies have kind of shamed the president into this action today. We would be standing alone, very obviously, if we didn't do something. It allows the president cover. He can say, look, I'm tough on Russia, but Putin is laughing at Trump tonight because he knows he has license to do whatever he wants.
Did the administration send a strong enough signal?
Not yet. If you want to send a strong signal, I think at some point you got to look at some money sanctions. You got to get at Putin and the individuals around him.
You mean like President Trump pursuing energy independence? That is the heart of the Russian economy. And guess what? That'll hurt Vladimir Putin and any economic chances or growth that he has. I've told you journalism is dead and buried in this country, so it's not surprising to hear the media bending over backwards to bash President Trump, even when he does something really tough and strong and good. Now, you're not going to hear this from the so-called journalists over at these other networks, but it is important to remember this is just the latest tough action from the Trump administration, because they won't tell you, but earlier in March, the president announced critical new economic sanctions against Russia in response to election meddling. In February, around 300 Kremlin-linked Russian mercenaries were killed or wounded by the U.S. military, that following Russia's aggressive actions near a base in Syria where Americans were stationed. And, of course, this all comes after President Obama essentially did nothing but appease and ignore and suck up to Vladimir Putin year after year. Now, tonight, Russia is vowing to retaliate against the Trump administration's tough actions. Oh, maybe they'll release the information they have on Trump. But unlike the Obama administration, President Trump, well, he's not going to take hostile actions by Russia very lightly.